Okay, so we are now live. Hello all, good afternoon or morning or evening, depending on what part of the globe you're joining us from. I'm Nihira, the online events coordinator at the Foundation for Agrarian Studies, also known as FAS. On behalf of FAS, I welcome you all to the online seminar on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on education in rural India. The Foundation for Agrarian Studies is a research institute based in India and established in 2003. Its major objectives are to facilitate multidisciplinary, theoretical, and empirical inquiry in the field of agrarian studies in India and elsewhere in less developed countries. It does so in association with a wide section of people interested in the agrarian question, including people associated with academic institutions, members of mass organizations working in the countryside, and other professionals and scholars. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a deep and multifaceted impact on life, production, and work in rural India. While some of these effects are temporary, the pandemic will also change the Indian countryside in certain permanent ways. FAS has been in the forefront of studies of the impact of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdowns on India's countryside. Our trustees and research collaborators have been speaking on the subject in different online platforms and young students and scholars, unions of peasants and agricultural workers, and women's association. In 2020, FAS started a pandemic studies unit to focus on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on agricultural production, non-agricultural and agricultural employment, including issues of women's work, food security, and agricultural and rural development policy. Under this study unit, we conducted 2 telephonic interviews in 26 villages across 13 states that fall in different agroecological zones in India. The findings from these studies have been widely disseminated through academic channels and publications and online events such as this one. The Review of Agrarian Studies, the peer-reviewed journal of the Foundation for Agrarian Studies, came out with a major special issue that brought together articles on the pandemic and agrarian conditions in India and different parts of the world. 2 research notes based on the data collected by the Pandemic Studies Unit are published in the current RAS issue. The notes focus on the impact of the pandemic on agricultural production and on food security and indebtedness in rural India. Please do visit the website of the journal, ras.org.in, to visit these research papers and notes. The Pandemic Studies Unit has also published 4 policy briefs on topics such as the Karnataka Reforms Ordinance 2020, migrant workers in India, and lessons from the Kerala experience on policies to support women during the pandemic. This seminar is the 5th in the series of online events conducted by FAS's Pandemic Studies Unit in collaboration with the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, whose support has been instrumental in this endeavor of ours. We are glad to have maintained a consistency in our efforts to disseminate the findings of the study unit. We organized our inaugural seminar in September 2020 and have hence conducted 4 online discussions on the impact of COVID-19 on various aspects of the rural economy. All the publications, studies, blog posts, and webinars by FAS team members and research collaborators are consolidated in the FAS website under the Pandemic Studies Unit link. The website is fas.org.in. I request you all to please visit our website and the web page in order to enrich yourselves about the work that we do. With this brief introduction, may I now invite the chair for today's session, Madhura Swaminathan, professor and head of the Economic Analysis Unit, Indian Statistical Institute, Bangalore, and chairperson of the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation in Chennai. He has a doctorate in economics from the University of Oxford and has worked on issues of food security, agriculture, and rural development for over 25 years. He recently co-edited a book titled Women and Work in Rural India. Let me request all the participants to keep noting your questions and comments in our Zoom Q&A box, or if you're watching us through our live streams on any of the comment sections of our live stream. Thank you.
Thank you, Nihira. And I welcome all of you to this seminar on the pandemic and education in rural India. The pandemic has affected entire economies and societies, and it has affected the old and the young, with people of all ages, in all sectors. But looking back, thinking about the pandemic, if I were to pick out, what are the two most important concerns, leaving aside the health issues, that people like us who are interested in enhancing human development in India are concerned about, I think one, of course, is the loss in incomes, earnings, the increase in poverty and food insecurity that has been on an unprecedented scale over the last 1 year. And the second, perhaps, which is less studied and less talked about, is the impact on the young on account of this gap in education, both for school children and college-going children. But I think it affects, the younger you are, perhaps the effect is more. And this toll on the young, on a sort of daily basis, on account of the mortality, we hear about the toll on the old. But I think we don't hear enough about the toll on the young. And today we have three outstanding speakers to tell us a little bit more about pandemic and its effect on education, on school-going children, on the problems, and also on some possible, if not solutions, at least some possible alternatives that could be taken up during this period. The first speaker we have today is Dr. Jyotsna, who is the director of the Center for Budget and Policy Studies here in Bengaluru. She's a PhD in economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University. She was an advisor on education to the Commonwealth Secretariat for 5 years in London. And she's someone who has worked on education, on various aspects of education, starting from right to education, to financing and budgetary decisions on education, gender equity. So I won't keep you away from her. Welcome, Jyotsna, and over to you. I'll give a reminder about 10 to 12 minutes and a sharp cutoff at 20. Please mute. Nihira, unmute her. Nihira, please.
Sorry, yeah, I've unmuted myself, yeah. So thank you, Madhura, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'll straight go to what I have to say, and I'll start with my conclusions first, and then try to substantiate why I say that. So in sum, if I have to sum the status of school education in India now post-COVID, I would say it was already not very good. There were various aspects that were of concern, but now it has become worse. So from bad, it had gone to worse, and I'll share why I say that. Also important in this conversation is this, that it's not only about COVID. What existed also got reflected. So all kinds of inequalities that already existed became worse. All kinds of issues that existed in school education in terms of pedagogy and quality, that became worse. And all kinds of other relationship that education has, especially school education has, with other aspects of lives of children and lives of, say, parents and families, that also became worse because of loss of income and livelihood. So I'll go to those one by one. So one of the most important thing that happened is school closure. So although it varied from state to state, and some states, like say for example, northeastern states had the closure was not as high as in most other states, still school has largely been closed during last 1 year, starting last March. What is the impact of that on the lives of children? So it's not only, and it's important to understand that school for many, especially in rural areas, is not only a place where they go only to learn. They also go there to socialize. They also go there to make friends. And for many, especially girls, that's the only place where they are actually interacting with their peers. And that changed. So when we did a study of more than 3,000 households, where we interviewed one adult and one child between 10 and 18, what we found that a simple question that, whether life was better before, and almost 78% said life was better before. And there was no difference between boys and girls. And when you asked why, they all said, some said because we could go and meet our friends, some said because we had school and teachers, and that took us away from home. So for some, it was a relief from the drudgery. For some, it was friendship. For some, it was simply the joy of learning. But school, even when it was not fully functional, see, all these states that I'm talking about, it's not that schools were very great. It's important to point that out, because whenever you talk, people say, but come on, what was great about school? Still, it had a role. It had a major role in the lives of children. And that got affected severely. And what it mattered, so most of the girls, not necessarily boys, were confined to home and disproportionately engaged in care work and chores. And boys were also involved in work. So we actually found that, as it even post-survey, when we went to field in some of these areas, when we actually did a bit of qualitative work, what we realized that boys are slowly moving towards work, girls towards marriage. We don't have like definite evidence of that, because these are anecdotal, these are qualitative evidence. So in terms of extent, in terms of number, we don't know, but these are definitely evidence. And those also match with newspaper reports and several other small studies that have been taken countrywide. And it all kinds of work. The worst that we saw in one village in Bihar, when actually a teacher said that boys are, it's a dry state, and they said that boys are actually engaged in bootlegging. They are actually serving illegal liquor. So it has gone to that extent. Now, and of course, gender plays a role. Now, come to learning. What's happening? As we know, online learning and mass telecast and broadcast became the rule across the world, and India was no exception. And while private schools opted for online, most of the public systems opted for TV telecasts, lesson-based, curriculum-based telecasts. Now, what was happening there? In our survey, what we found that about 50% of households owned a TV, and yet only about 11% of children actually reported watching education-related program ever. And interestingly, that a few other surveys have reported exactly the same figure, 11 to 12% in different states. So in about, if I match, I mean, I'm not doing a scientific metadata, but if I put these together, then about 10 states, I would say, is reporting the same. And then that tells you that it's really perhaps true. And what happened to, so why are they not watching? It could be time issue, morning when it's being broadcast, children are busy, especially girls are busy doing housework, or it could be simply the interest issue, the way it is happening, that whole classroom pressure is not there. And if family is not either releasing you to do that or putting pressure on you, you are not interested. It could be the connectivity issue. It could be various reasons, but it exists. Now, what about phone line? What we found that the phone, ownership, yes, many families have phone. What we found that how much, about again half of the families had phone, about 1/3 of the families had smartphone also, so internet enabled phone. But there were several things. One, that phone was owned largely in 71% of the households by a male member, who is not necessarily sitting at home and who is not necessarily allowing you to use that for your lessons. Second, When phones were owned by mothers, it was far more available to children. But girls, especially older girls, like say 14 plus girls, parents and other family members are also very suspicious of them and not really, that they are on the name of schooling. Are they talking to somebody else? So their access to internet becomes even lower. And then comes the economy. The economy also plays a role, that even if you have a smartphone, you may not be having the internet package that's important for using your phone for learning. So these are the issues of learning, and I'll also come to learning loss later using other studies. But the links with livelihood loss and income loss is also severe. And I'm talking about actually the last wave, when the incidence of COVID itself was not as widespread in many of these states. And yet the loss of livelihood was severe. Like 87% of our sample, they were engaged in informal labor, and almost everyone said that we have less work now. We don't have enough work. And almost half of them had at least one member migrating to larger cities, and the distress was severe. This is last July. And since we have some of the areas where we continuously work, we don't see much change now. And in fact, in this phase, it would have perhaps become much worse. We are doing actually a second round now, and hopefully in a month or two, we will be there with our second round in at least one state, Bihar. Food, it's not only the loss of livelihood, it also impacted hunger. 7% of our respondents actually reported going hungry. And 7% is a big number. It's not a small number. And many of those, a much bigger percentage, reported changing their food pattern. Now come to, even in terms of learning loss. Ajim Premji Foundation had a 5-state study, and they have gone much deeper into learning. And it's very clear that there has been severe learning loss. Children, what they learned in their previous year's grades had forgotten 90 to 80% of that. So it's huge in terms of both language and mathematics. And that also we saw, we tried to, after we did this survey, we realized that internet is not the solution, TV is not the solution, let's try letters. And we started sending letters, like letters were also lessons. And we realized that many of our children who should have been, they were in class 7, 8, this is the children we are doing an action research with them in Bihar, state schools largely, they were not able to read, even if it was, so the reading, abilities were already poor. It became worse because they have nothing at home. And some of the policies come into picture. Look at, for example, many states, Bihar definitely, have moved to cash transfer. Now, cash transfer, yes, cash helps, especially in times of distress. See, many families actually reported receiving cash from education department, which was meant for something else, which they used for, food or anything, or say medicines. So that yes, it played a role, but then at what cost and to what extent? So if you're transferring, say, 200 rupees or 250 rupees, say $3 for textbooks, and that gets used for food, it's not enough for more than, say, 3 days food at most. But at the cost of buying a set of textbooks for the entire year. What I have to confirm, in this year we are asking, this second round we are asking, but what I hear from government sources there, that only about 12-13% children actually bought textbooks last year. Now, in a context where there is no books, the literate environment is completely absent. How do you sustain your learning? How do you sustain your even reading? You have no access to any newspaper, magazine, books, and even textbooks now don't exist. So government has to think about these, that cash transfer is not a bullet for everything, magic bullet for it.
That's
also other
halfway.
Yes.
Yeah, just a warning.
How many minutes more, Madhura?
8-10 minutes, yeah.
Oh, that's fine. That's more than enough. Now, what happens when you try other things? So, and how are, I'll come to why I'm saying that what existed became worse. You take the issues of poverty. poor children were already facing problems. What we saw in our survey, that those who reported food shortage, who reported livelihood loss, they had much less access to internet-based education. They had much less access to TV, and they had much less access to any other forms, for example, books or anything else. So these became much worse. Poverty was anyway there, but the divide became much worse. Look at gender. So it became worse because girls are far more engaged in care work as compared to others. And it's not only about care work, it's also the loss of mobility, loss of any kind of freedom that they had outside their, say, domestic environment. And caste also, because you have a connection between caste and economic status. And also in terms of the livelihood, in unorganized labor, migratory, you have a caste pattern there. And about government, now look at post office. So I'll share a bit about what happened when we decided to send postcards. Now, not easy. We were trying to send 800 individual postcards to children. The delivery itself became a problem. If our postman was from the upper caste, he was not interested in actually and it's not only about upper caste, it's about the dominant caste and the power hierarchy existing in the village. You all do village studies, how things are. And the most important thing there, that even when we got in touch with senior officials in the postal department and tried to deliver, it was of limited help. So how institutions, if they're already dysfunctional, it makes it worse when it comes a pandemic or any form of disaster, and makes things much worse than the disaster alone could have made. Then the other thing is about the centralized. Why are teachers not active? Why teachers see what we could do. For example, despite limitations, we managed when the lockdown got over, when systems were better, then our local mentors started actually gathering children, 5 children, 10 children, and trying to use postcard as a resource material and teach them. Now, why don't teachers do that? What we saw, especially in Bihar, that even when teachers were supposed to go to school, they were reporting, they had to report, but they were not supposed to teach. And you are not free, you don't have those tools, you don't have those resources, and you don't have that freedom to act on your own, that what can I do for my children? So that's whole centralized kind of decision making, be it whether to give cash transfer or not, or what to do during COVID, that also affects the functioning. And one important thing is coaching. What we see that in most states, and that again cuts across, while schools have been closed, coaching centers have been, and coaching is now even tuition centers are referred to as coaching. Almost every village in most of these states had a so-called coaching center where children will have no COVID protocols, nothing. They will gather and they will be studying, especially 7th, 8th senior classes. So how do you reconcile with that is also something that education department and state governments need to talk about. And then comes this whole issue of accountability. And again, a very centralized kind of response. Yes, laws are important. Laws define entitlement. Look at laws regarding child marriage and child labor and what's really happening in the field. Why is it that nobody is accountable? Why is it that we have third level of governance, panchayats, municipalities, ward committees, and yet nobody is accountable when it comes to child marriage, child labor? So, and then it's not only about saying, these things have been said in the past, but there are ways of doing that. Why can't you have collectives more empowered? Unless you transfer real power, have institutional processes that facilitate that transfer of power, these things do not change. We know that very well. Now it's time to act rather than, to understand things better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyotsna. And perhaps when we the question answer session, you will elaborate, it'll interest me a little more on the comparison across states, because clearly Bihar, which you have the most experience with, sounds, what should I say, sad and scary at the same time. And the next speaker is perhaps going to give us a different story, because we turn now to Kerala, which after what Jyotsna said, may sound like another planet, but Kerala's had a unique experience. Of course, I think the point she made, the base was good. So it's where you were before COVID, perhaps, which matters as much in terms of how you were able to cope with it. But we have today our second speaker, Dr. Anvar Sadath, who is the CEO of the Kerala State Infrastructure and Technology for Education, KITE company. This is really the nodal agency for ICT education in state schools in Kerala. He has long experience of working with IT. He has been a consultant for the information mission in Kerala, and he's now an advisor to the NCRT. So he's going to tell us something about what has been the experience of using IT in Kerala schools during the pandemic. Dr. Sadath, over to you. Sorry. Can I just ask everybody to please put in their questions either in the Zoom chat box or in whichever platform they're viewing this session. And we will take questions for Dr. Sadath immediately after, as he has a pressing engagement. So please type in questions for him as soon as you can. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Sadath.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madhura and the whole team. I'm happy to share the experience with this auspicious forum. Maybe I have a small presentation. I will start with that. Is it visible and audible, I think?
Yes.
Okay. See, basically,
please make it full screen.
Yeah, is it?
Dr. Anvar, please make it full screen.
Yeah, sir, it's full screen only right now. 1 minute. Slide show. Full screen. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, go to slideshow, please. Slideshow.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So basically, Government of Kerala has started IT at school initiatives in early 2001. So it's almost 2 decades that we have started including ICT in education. And in 2017, the IT at school has been converted into a government enterprises called KITE, Kerala Infrastructure and Technology for Education. And there is a holistic intervention on ICT education for the last 2 decades, and it's being continuous. So we have a holistic intervention in capacity building of teachers, content development, and deploying the hardware and all. We have a channel called KITE Victors, which was started in 2006 by the then Honorable President Dr. APJ Kalam was inaugurated that, which was basically on EduSat network, which is there in almost all states. And there's a mechanism for e-governance. We have implemented some program like high-tech school program, which has digitized 45,000 classrooms from classes 8 to 12. And also high-tech lab for primary school, which is covering another 11,000 schools. So basically all these infrastructure were in place, but now it falls under the impression that the students are coming to school. If the students are coming to the school, they have the broadband connectivity, laptop, projectors, handycam, and we have around 2 lakh laptop with the free software within all in-bit facilities. Resource portal called Samagra, and there is a collaborative content platform called School Wiki, which was we were able to create.
Dr. Sadath, your slides are not moving.
Okay, no, it's only that this second
Okay,
slide.
okay. No, you're
no.
on the first slide, the title slide.
One minute. First slide.
No, earlier it was only the title.
Is it okay? Is it moving?
We have come to the second slide now.
First bell slide.
No. Now
Yes.
you're on slide 4 now. Slide number 4.
Okay. This is the program which is called First Bell Digital Program. So please see the circumstances in May last year, exactly almost this year. So the government has decided to start the classes from 1st June onward. So the option available was either go for online mode or some other words. To go for online mode, as we know, the connectivity and the digital access infrastructure are not sufficient for each kid. And we had a broadcast channel, Victors, which were available earlier only on cable networks in the state. Now it is available for the DTH operators also in the last year. So 94.7% was the connectivity, cable and DTH connectivity in Kerala. Those remaining, for the remaining students, there were some statistics which was taken for the purpose, and there is a mass campaign for donating TVs and access devices to kids. So by June, second week of last year, it was ensured that not a single student is left out. So the government started this program, First Bell program, mainly with 3 pillars. The first one, the First Bell program, digital classes. It's not online classes. It's a mode of broadcast plus online plus offline. I will come to that. For the first and most important point is that it's only an interim arrangement, and it is not an alternate to the regular classes. Second one, not even a single student should be left out of this program. Then the third one, the class teacher have to do continuous follow-up with the students through various medias, including the physical meeting after the classes. So these 3 components built together to succeed for the digital education. And classes started from 1st June. So far, it's around 3,500 to 4,000 hours of content. And we had a separate session for Tamil and Kannada medium, and also the revision classes, audio books for the hearing difficult persons, visually challenged persons, and sign adapted classes for the other category. So this is the First Bell program. And when we took the statistics, it was 2.6 lakh students were lacking access in May second week of last year. In May 4th week, it reduced to 1 lakh, 0.1 million, 1 lakh. And June 1st week, the statistics was 12,000. And by June 2nd week, we could able to reduce it to 0. That doesn't mean that each and every student has a device, but they have the access to this TV or the other net-based system was ensured by the government. And the same system is repeated. And you see the statistics and all, it has the social media, even some classes has got 50 lakh views, 15 crore monthly views for the channel. So these are the statistics.
Please move your slides if you have gone to the next one.
Okay. One minute. You know, then
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I will stop the slide sharing. I will come to it. So this.
No. They're good slides, but they're not moving at all. Yeah.
Okay. So the slide. To be frank, I was not prepared for the slide. I just.
Okay. This is fine. Go ahead.
So I would like to now would prefer more to answer your queries. So basically, this happened throughout the year, and fortunately, we could able to bring the student to schools of class 10 and 12 by January and February, so that they had the opportunity to interact with the teachers for the in furtherance of the classes which was offered through the digital media. This year, what we propose is that the same mode of digital classes will be continuing. Along with that, we are focusing for direct interaction with the teachers through an online safe and secure platform, which will be initially class 12 and class 10, and that too, the digital medium will be introduced only after ensuring that all the students have access to this. That will be ensured by the class teacher. For a class teacher, it's a 30 or 35 students. So that unit is comfortable. So wherever the gap finding, they will do the finding. In short, no, the COVID-19 has impacted adversely on the education system in the worst way. It's not an alternative. The damage has already done, but we were trying our level best for bridging the academic gap with the supplementary, with this sort of supplementary mode. So this is in short the experience of Kerala. Maybe I can have more this thing in the QA section.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to take a few questions for Dr. Sadath, since he will have to leave. So one of the questions that has come in the chat box is, what percentage of students accessed this or attended these classes? Do you have any statistics on that?
I will tell. Basically, it's coming to the micro level. The class teacher is the basic unit who has to access that. So the department on a fortnightly basis taking the statistics from, we have a state office, district office, then it comes to the sub-district office. From the sub-district, it is the schools. So the schools have to take the data of their student and report to headmaster or the principal. The principal has to report to the education officers. So wherever they report that the students are not attending, the reason have to be recorded and the alternate arrangement is made. So in fact, it is supposed to ensure all students are attending the classes. We have the statistics for social media and all, but for the TV viewing, we don't have the statistics. But along with that, the worksheet has been distributed through the Samagra Shiksha network, wherein the teachers are collecting the printed worksheet in the physical way. So whenever there is a gap, they have to report. So in short, I can say that wherever the teachers support mechanism have acted very promptly, it would be able to sustain and well. But whenever it is lacking, then those points, there are serious issues or concerns.
So I think a couple of follow-up questions. One is, how were the teachers in touch with the students? By visiting the home or on the phone?
Yeah, basically this is the way. If there are 30 students for a class teacher, maybe 20-25 will have the social media access or telephonic access, which they will connect in that way. For others, they have to either go to physically or to bring to the points like our library system and our Anganwadis and all, where they will visit them in batches and all. But this takes maybe twice in a fortnightly basis or like that. So most of the medium will be the social media and phone, but the teacher know what the student, what facility the student is having, and they can do the other alternate mechanisms.
Okay, and again, a small question from Jyotsna here, that the TV, how do you actually measure the TV usage? How many hours it is or how it is?
That's what, it's three-pronged. One is the primary broadcast is through the TV. Then it will be putting on our social media, our First Bell portal. You can visit the firstbell.kite.kerala.gov.in. That portal is there. There you can see how many views and all. It's all, but you don't know who is viewing and who is not, who are not viewing on that. But it's a general feedback that how many views and all on that. We cannot take the statistics on a TV viewing, but the social media viewing we can take the statistics.
Okay. So two more questions have come. One is, how did you deal with children of migrants who may not be Malayalam or Tamil, Kannada speaking, and children in tribal areas? Were there any special
Yeah, exactly. There were so many parallel mechanisms. First one is Kerala, we have
I
think he has frozen. Okay, let's just give him a minute to come back. While we are waiting for him, Ramachandran, can I ask you to come in and perhaps give a comment on?
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah. I mean, I must say I'm no substitute for Anvar, who's but I work in Kerala. I work with the State Planning Board. See, this in Kerala, as Anvar said, Dr. Anvar said, the very important factor is, of course, universal school education and the fact that in the last 3 years, since 2017 actually, there's been an enormous expansion of ICT-enabled school education in those 3 years, in the pre-pandemic phase. So that was a factor of enormous importance in the state's response in the field. Anwar, you're back. I was just, sorry. Yeah. Dr. Anwar, you take over. I was just...
No, why don't you finish your comment? He was giving a comment and then we'll go back to Dr. Sadath.
Dr. Anwar, may I just finish?
Yes, he's not connected to audio yet. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear Dr. Anwar?
I can hear.
I'm just filling in the gap, and then you'll come back.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
The expansion of ICT-enabled school education was a factor of enormous importance in the state's response in this field. We've got this 1,000 classroom program for government schools in the state. So smart classroom program. So there has been an enormous expansion in the last few years. Now the other thing, I think what Dr. Anwar's thing is that presentation showed, and I think we should put it explicitly. A decision was taken by General Education and Dr. Sadath and Dr. Anwar Sadath and his colleagues that this year we'd try to make it a normal school year. That was the objective. Of course, that objective in very difficult circumstances. Let's get to students every day from the first bell till the last bell of school. Let's be with the students and let's try and teach them in some way. Yeah? So that's why on June 1st, it introduced a powerful sense of sort of normalcy among parents and children. I mean, all of us who live in Kerala are familiar with some children who go to school who have attended these classes. And so in the homes, there was some sense that school is going on every day. And so it's like, it was not a classroom. It had all the problems of the pandemic, but school is going on. And I think the principles that Dr. Anwar mentioned, one is that of, universalizing through the television network, which people are very familiar with, by the way. This Kite Victor's educational channel is not something that came onto them after the pandemic. This is a channel which people who are in education are familiar with in the normal course of things. So secondly, to the extent to which physical interaction was possible, that was done. Thirdly, and there's an enormous role played in Kerala by our local government institutions and simply acts of local civic cooperation. You know that so-and-so household does not have a TV. No? You know that so-and-so household does not have a facility or cable. For cable, we rectified, as he said. But so the local panchayats and other communities got together and got access to them through televisions. So that was something like 5% of the population was covered through such provision, while 95% had it. The other 5% was covered through such provision. Now, so this was through mainly through the distribution of televisions and in some cases smartphones. So the viewership for specific classes exceeded 40 lakhs. In fact, what happened was these emergency classes, because it was like that, was picked up by hundreds of people in the Gulf region in the United States and Europe as well. So it would exceed, sometimes the viewership would exceed the number of school children in Kerala. And it's been able to, continue. Now, this is of course no substitute for actual schooling, for actually attending schools, and there are still children who are in households where there are plenty of books, tradition of learning, and they of course have suffered less than those who are from very poor families, who have whose parents may not have as high levels of formal education as others. So there have been differences. There has been deprivation of different types. But I think that to the extent that the efforts of KITE and the school education department, and also, as Anvar said, the other thing was the worksheets. The worksheets ensured that people were actually were working, children were actually attending class. So these were some of the things that occurred. Maybe Anvar wants to take it on. Sorry. I'll leave it.
Yeah, thank you. We lost you in between. And let me just add a question which came while you were away, which is, you could answer that also, is that how effective is this online education for the younger children?
See, basically, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I have switched on to my phone. I have started my. Sorry, I'm sorry, and I'm happy that Dr. Ramayendran sir has. No.
Anvar, you must answer the question also. Please
Okay.
answer the question also about migrants and tribal children.
Sure. So I was answered. First, I'll answer to that. See, basically, there are different segments. First, we have 4 mediums. One is Tamil. Kannada, Tamil-speaking students there's a Tamil medium in Palakkad and Idukki, some portion, Kannada medium, English medium, Malayalam medium. General classes we took in Malayalam medium with subtitles of English and English words. So we catered the 2 medium. We had an exclusive TV and social media arrangement for Tamil and Kannada. And for others, tribal students, what we have done, the SSK has gone to the extent that there are different dialects and started preparing classes at their own dialects, their own languages and all, because it's slightly different from our style. And it has been arranged in the locations where in their urs or the areas where they assemble and has been delivered. So there is a specific targeted program for the tribal areas and all. And that the other one, I said, the visually challenged students and hearing impaired students, it's specifically sign adapted classes and audio books, all those things. So all areas are covered in under that. So what was the next question?
About how effective it is for.
I will tell you. See, basically the classes for younger children are not the normal way of taking online classes. It's through activity based and the storytelling mode. We have limitations through the digital media, but now we encourage them to participate. The teacher, maybe you can see some of the classes, they will take balloons and the familiar this thing and will give some activities to the kids, which they will practice before the TV, and they will take the photos and videos and will given back. So it was sort of on an engaging mode, and the response for primary and upper primary was good when compared to the high school and higher secondary level. So the teachers were SCRT has selected the teachers and they are well versed with the engaging the child and to making them, because they are all strained mentally in somewhat. So to make them comfortable, the major challenges for the teachers were to make them comfortable with activities and comprehensions.
Thank you. And I hope you can stay on and listen to our next speaker, and if possible.
Sure, I will be accessing from my, I am traveling, I will be accessing from my phone,
yes,
and whenever required I will.
Because I think we will have some comparative discussion on these questions at the end from Jyotsna and Professor Oshikawa. I would now like to invite our third speaker, Professor Fumiko Oshikawa, who is Emeritus Professor at Kyoto University Center for Southeast Asian Studies. She is past president of JASAS, the Japanese Association of South Asian Studies. She is a scholar of India who has worked for a long time on issues of education, migration, particularly in Bihar. So we may have some comparative discussion here. And most recently, over the last few years, I'm very happy to say she is a collaborator of the Foundation for Agrarian Studies. And today, I think she will talk about a issue that was raised by Jyotsna, which is of great concern, which is the pandemic and what it has done to educational inequalities. So over to you, Oshikawa-san.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to participate in this webinar, and also I'm very grateful but I can access to the very good survey that conducted by last September-October period. Today, my main purpose of my presentation is to introduce the main findings of the survey conducted by Foundation of Agrarian Studies last year. It's a quick telephonic survey, and the part of the general survey, several questions are asked about the school education. So this is my main purpose of today's presentation. Okay, before starting the main part, I like to just say the brief introduction things, and it's also the conclusion. As the Dr. Jad rightly pointed out, now we are how many months? 14, 15 months has passed since the COVID-19 broke out in India and all over the world. We came to have some kind of common understanding what this disaster impacted in the education. It's not only for India, but all over the world, more or less. Same kind of things are happening, I think. These are the main points, that the pandemic have made a pre-existed disparity or inequality or any problem more visible. It was there, but now it's more visible. This is point one. The second one is the pandemic have aggravated the disparity and inequality or any other problem aggravate. So now the Bihar and Kerala that discussed that the states like Kerala, who had a good education infrastructure and system in pre-COVID-19 time, could cope with the new situation much better than the states like we have. This is very common knowledge now. And also, as the Dr. Jha and had rightly pointed out, that online classes or remote classes need supporting environment at home. every people first believed that we could do something by online classes, internet, etc. But unless some base at the household level, we need it. At the Kerala example shows that the Kerala government and Kerala's good educational infrastructure and experience of ICT education before COVID-19 period helped to cope with the new situation. And the fourth point, now we come to realize that in this situation, the government initiative or government policy is very important. What kind of decision and quickness, how very speedy decision making, all these things are very important. And this point I will not be able to talk about today in today's talk that not only the school education, but also we have to think about the many other related welfare problem of the children. In Japan, it is a very serious question that those who are in the families affected by the COVID-19, they are irritating parents. The income is cut very much, and all this environment make domestic violence and other problems much worse. And it's not only that education or economics, but also mentally and physically problems coming out. But today's talk, I can talk only the first 2 points and showing the main finding of the survey. I'd like to just talk about what is going on in the rural area in India. Sorry. The survey was conducted by the Foundation of Agrarian Studies last September-October period. And total number of children and youth whose primary status student is 208 in 12 states. The number is quite limited, of course, and the sampling method is rather not so systematic. So I can't calculate exact figures from these data, but some of the data are very much telling what is going on. So today I'll show many tables, but please do not try to calculate exact percentages. The survey data is not designed like that. The questionnaire, this I will talk later on, and every survey has merit and demerit, of course, but because this is a very quick telephonic survey, the samples are very limited, and because of to make the questionnaire very simple, some questions are very simple. For example, we ask about the alternative schools, and but there are many kinds of alternative schools, and say maybe once in a week and 15 minutes to almost every day. But all these things are coming into alternative schools. So we can't identify the qualitative difference between the kids. That is a very big problem. And one more problem is that I didn't participate in the telephone survey by myself. If I could talk with the respondent directly. If maybe some say qualitative knowledge or feeling, I could get it. So I'd like to request the FA staff who actually participated in the survey, please supplement the qualitative feeling like that. So this is the introduction. This is the samples, and this is questionnaire, and the very simple one. The first is the participation. Are you participating in any alternative classes? And they have to select one of these. And does the household have smartphone, laptop to access online classes? Yes and no. Yes. This is also a very simple question, and laptop and smartphone is very different for the tools of instruction. And as Dr. Jia rightly pointed out, even if they have smartphones, it not necessarily means that the children can use freely or not. And so, but the question like that. And the third question is the internet service sufficient to attend the online class? Yes and no. And the number 4 question, does the household own the TV? Yes and no. And is there any educated person in the household who can help the children with schoolwork? Yes and no. And the last question is, did any children in this household drop out from school, college during the pandemic? And the survey was conducted in last September, October, and that timing, the most of the schools are fully closed. So obvious case of dropout, the number is quite limited, I found it. But now it's opened and again closed. So if the time of advancement, dropout case may be increased. But so I omit the last question. The first, this is the, sorry.
Oshikawa-san, you have 10 minutes, just a warning.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I will quickly do it. And this is one of the overall pictures. But so are you participating in any type of alternative class? What we found is around 1/3 of children in age group in this. It is roughly 1/3 not attending any alternative class. And if we see this question by social group type, slightly, as we expected, slightly the tendency is that Seijuka's children are slightly less in participating alternative class. And if we see by socio-economic class, yes, this range road, rich middle peasant, poor peasant, and there is some clear difference in the figure. These 3 groups and manual workers. For the manual worker, those who are not participating in any alternative class is larger than the size of those who are participating. And this is the state-wise. And to make the table simple, I just see the several states, Kerala and Punjab. Those who are going to private school and public school, all the children are participating in any of the alternative classes. And this is the Bihar figure, like that. Say more than half of the students in the government school are not attending in any alternative class. The difference is, say, the big gap, big disparities, statewide disparities. And one of the reasons why the participation of participation of alternative class is different is that the private school and the so-called public school or government school, the difference might be. So I just calculated the number of the children who are participating in both schools. And for the schedule caste, the government school is around more than 2 times than the private. But for the others, the number is almost same. And if we see the socio-economic class, the landlord to rich peasant class, private schooling is more than the government school. And perhaps except Kerala and some small number of states, the private school has much more positive to introduce ICT online schools, online classes. And so these the students going to private school and getting better online classes. Those who are not going to the government schools have less chance to participate in the alternative class. That kind of things are going on. And in the survey, the facilities are also asked. The question is, does the household have a smartphone, laptop, or TV, or say, internet service is sufficient or not, something like this. And this laptop and smartphones concerned, the gap or disparity is not so big. But if we see the internet service, which shows that the household economic condition is directly connected to this one, the difference is very big. And if we see the socioeconomic class-wise, the internet service sufficient to not, this question shows a very big gap. And if we can identify, we can divide a smartphone and laptop separately, the disparity could be shown more clear, but this time we couldn't do it. And sorry. This is a very important part of the survey, that the question is that, is there any educated person in your household to support the children's education or not? And this, so I'll do the next. This clearly shows that for the most of manual worker, and it overlaps scheduled caste population, most of the children are first generation learners, which means that they don't have any educated person in the household. And perhaps our experience show me that, taught us that ICT education at the younger age, the elementary stage, especially the children of 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, without the help of the family members, and the ICT is quite difficult to make a real impact on children. So in this regard, the first generation learners, especially in the poor, especially in the state where the education is infrastructure quite poor, like Bihar, they are very much difficult and disadvantageous position. And
ask you to wind up in a couple of minutes.
okay, so I'll skip it. So what we found is that yes, there is one kind of polarization is going on in education in India, in state-wise as well as household, family-wise. Those who have good resources can cope with the situation much better than those who don't have any resources. So it's quite so we need further and more full-scale survey and what is happening, and also we make a very practical survey and survey on how we can solve these, say, first generation learner problem in poor state. So thank you very much.
Okay. But
sorry, it very
yeah,
slow.
No, that's absolutely fine. And then maybe we can come back to your slide, which you left out, which is a very important one on any facility when the discussion. Maybe you can bring up the state-wise comparison.
Thank you, Professor Oshikawa. And we move now to a Q&A and a discussion. And I think what is coming out very much from what Jyotsna said and what Fumiko said is that what is the state of education, the state of household resources, the availability of an educated person within the family. So what was the state of education of children prior to the pandemic? It has become really, very important in ability to cope with this, most unusual circumstances. So I think that's, I should add here that those of you interested in the survey that Professor Oshikawa talked about, of course, is the FAS pandemic survey, which largely focused on crop production and incomes. But at the persistence of Dr. Oshikawa, we decided to also explore questions of education. So perhaps I'm going to ask Jyotsna to come in, because there are some questions, Jyotsna, about your survey and size and methodology, and also was it telephonic as the FAS survey, or how did you collect data? So if you could speak to that, and then we'll go to more questions discussion on this.
Yeah, okay. So we, actually it started before this survey that I'm talking about, that since we have an action research project in Bihar, and suddenly when the lockdown came, we decided we didn't know how to engage with our children. And so we did one small telephonic survey of about 800 children. And then, and this project is funded by Malala Fund. So then they approached us and said that, why don't you do it a multi-state in India, and also it's actually part of a global survey. We use the same design for survey in Pakistan, Nigeria, and Ethiopia as well. And we were the technical partner for that. The global.
Tell us the name of that. What is the survey called, or you said
the report? The Indian report is Life in the Time of COVID. It's on our website. And the global, they have, basically we have written certain articles, and it's part of that. I can share those links with you, which you can then make public.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in India, what we did when we did the larger one, multi-state, so we went by basically through partner NGOs. And the sample size is 3176, which means 3176 adults, and in the same households, 3176 children, a child between the age of 10 and 18. So the total size is twice that, but households is 3176. And we asked all the livelihood and income and cash, all those food related questions to adult. And then we went to the child with adults' consent and asked children about their lives and their work and their schooling and learning. So that's how we did. The number, it varies from state to state. So it's not in that sense we didn't do, it was a very, basically wherever we had larger number of partners they could do, it went by that. It's a mix of telephonic and face-to-face, because say, for example, in certain parts, they did face-to-face, in certain parts we did telephonic, even in same, but we used the same questionnaire. We had, in terms of when we trained these people, they were basically these NGOs who are funded by Malala Fund. Then we took this, if we are doing face-to-face, there are certain aspects, and if you are doing telephonic, there are certain aspects. So we had accordingly trained them. And apart from pandemic, like Assam, it includes Assam, Bihar, UP, Delhi, and Telangana. And in Assam, it was also the time of flood. If you remember, last year flood also was quite, every year flood is bad in Assam. So that also affected, and therefore, so it was even telephone. So telephone became even more difficult during flood than face-to-face for them, because there was no line, no electricity, nothing. So that's about it. And then basically we analyzed it, entire data we analyzed and published the report.
Can I come in with a question here for you, and which is what Professor Oshikawa mentioned and has also come in as a question, which is the difference between the private school and what we call the government schools or the public school, in terms of the private schools, particularly we're talking about rural private schools. We're not talking about the elite private schools in urban India. So rural privates, given the quality of rural private schools, the fact that they may have charged higher fees and continued to charge through the pandemic, do we have any information on that? And how was this inequality between public and private? How did it affect outcomes for children belonging to different economic groups? So I will ask Jyotsna, and maybe then I will pass it on to Professor Oshikawa as well.
Okay, what we found it was very interesting, because that when we also had a question about going back to school, and interestingly about 40% children actually were uncertain about going back to school. When school reopens, will you be able to go back? They either said don't know, maybe not sure. Those kinds of answers were about 40%, and this was much higher for those who were actually going to private school. And so one thing that we felt that what is happening is in rural areas, that those who had that affordability slightly, the difference is not much. Those who were sending their children to private schools, and especially boys, there are many households where boys go to private schools, especially, and that's true in all these states, and girls are going to public schools. Now with reduced income and livelihood loss, they did not have the capacity to pay for private school, and therefore that uncertainty was higher among those children who were going to private schools. That's something we found in our study, and that again comes back to that why it's important to have strong functional public education. In terms of intervention, we didn't really find private schools. They were trying, again, the internet based, and this group, they had the same basically constraints in accessing internet. If they could not access. Even in public system, there were a number of teachers who were actually trying to send a lot of WhatsApp messages, materials linked with classrooms, So there were individual efforts in addition to TV broadcast in all these states. But children, if they do not, they cannot access public, they were also unable to access private. And private in rural areas, our sense was that simply, it's also closer. If you're looking at that, many of those closed, converted into tuition centers. So they immediately responded to the crisis and converted themselves to tuition centers for all children. For a small fee, for 50 rupees, 100 rupees, you are allowing children to come, especially higher classes, and maintaining a semblance of continuing of education.
Can I ask Dr. Anvar if he's there, that was there any difference in uptake in private and public schools in Kerala in terms of instruction during pandemic?
Basically, we do handle with the public schools. Private school, they follow the state syllabus, which include the government and government aided and unaided sector. This other stream, the CBSE and ICSE, what I understand is that they are doing online mode in some places. This thing, it's not following the common pattern. But we address 47 lakh students which are belonging to the public education system in both the public and private sector.
So for our listeners, Kerala is the perhaps unique in India in that over the last few years, the enrollment in public schools and government schools has gone up. People have left private schools and joined public schools.
Yeah, we have in the last 3 years, we have 6.8 lakhs more students who have joined public schools in Kerala for the 3 years. Sorry, for the 4 years.
So I think, Jyotsna, I think there's a shift from
Can I ask
private to
a
public.
question?
Yeah,
Can I ask a question? Is it also because of the higher in-migration to Kerala? Something that was not the case 20 years ago in Kerala, but now a lot of migration from Bihar, Assam, Bengal to Kerala, and migrants' children are going in large numbers to public schools.
Migrant children are not to that number. It's because they normally come without families or here. Maybe Dr. VKR can add on to that. I don't have the data right now, but basically what happened, the government, when it took charge in 2000, started public education rejuvenation mission, and there was a clear-cut message that the academic excellence along with the infrastructure upgradation is a key intervention area for the public education. That is why these almost 5,000 crore worth infrastructure and other digital upgradation has been done for the school education system. So there were, for the past 25 years, in 2018, the total number of students have crossed the previous year. It was declining to that level. So the confidence in the public, especially in the middle society, mediocre society, and they got confidence in the public education system through rigorous campaign and results.
Professor Oshikawa, there is a question for you about dropouts. That how did you have to unmute yourself? Do you have any data on dropouts, or do you have any prediction about dropouts?
The total sample is about 200 something, and the dropout at the September-October time is just 3, and I remember that's just 3. It's the survey timing. If we surveyed, say, just now, the number will be much more, I believe. But in September, all the schools are closed. So even if they are not confident to send back their children to school, but it doesn't appear that the obvious dropout at that timing. So we have to be very careful that the dropout will increase, and at the time of advancement do something like that. The dropout problem is now it not yet started. It will increase. This is my feeling that now. There's some time.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that next month, June, July, when the new year school starts,
Yeah.
that is the time we'll really...
or after 1 or 2 years, because of this pandemic period, some students can lose their hope to be to get school certificate, and then drop out. So it takes, say, half year, 1 year or 2 years, and gradually dropping out rate will increase. This is my feeling.
So Jyotsna, if I can just ask you to come in on that, because you did say that you're already hearing about girls going for marriage and boys taking part in labor. So, of course, that was a last year. So maybe it is only, they may have done it during the year because, you know, there was no online class in effect, and they may go back. Or and let me ask you about if you actually, these children who you said were working, or was it a more sort of permanent dropout, or do you have any idea whether they would come back? And the second question which has come is that, do you have any idea of, you know, the assessments, what is happening about assessments and, you know, learning, quality of learning, has that been assessed in any way during this period of pandemic? And I think we'll have to wrap up with that. So if I can leave that with you.
Okay, thanks, Madhura. See, dropout in terms of the hardcore data, that's difficult to have, and I think that's that doesn't exist at the moment. All those who have gone to field have reported. So these are various reports that if you see from different parts, it definitely, many of these children are not going to come back. And that we are, like, for example, the NGOs that participated in our study in Assam, and since they are partners, we are funded by the same, so we do converse. So many of the tea garden areas, for example, they are saying that many children, when schools reopened, and Assam schools reopened earlier than other states, children never came back. And that's what we are seeing also partly in Bihar, and especially in semi-urban areas. They have already joined work, and therefore they are not coming back. Boys and girls also either work, they also work, or marriage. But see what happens also, that it's not easy to get data. Marriage remains underreported. See, everybody is aware of the Child Marriage Act. And what happens that either they make a fake certificate, and it's true across. I mean, I can tell you UP, Bihar, Telangana, Rajasthan, another study from Rajasthan that came that also confirms that. So, and they're basically marrying them because it's costing less. It's not a big wedding, and it's, you know, then less risky. You don't have a grown-up girl at home, and therefore you don't have to worry about any kind of risks of her going out and deciding to fall in love or whatever. So so that is happening. And I think many of these long absences, even in the past, if you see, even in other countries, if you look at the existing studies, they tell you that long absences from school often lead to dropout. So if you draw from that, it is definitely going to be there.
Can I ask Dr. Anvar also to come in briefly on this question of how are you making assessments, particularly of primary and upper primary children? What has been the Kerala during this year? How have assessments been carried out?
Basically, the assessment were not made the way which we are supposed to do in the regular days, except for the public examination for classes 10, 12, and 11. Up to classes 1 to 9, it was the worksheet are distributed to students, and teachers are taking it, collecting from it. It's in a manual way. besides that, normally they do give some short assignments in between through social media and all. And as I said before, those who have not that facility, then the physical printed copies will be circulated. But it was not in a perfect way. It was just for the purpose of taking feedback. That's all. If in short, the assessment in its holistic perspective has not happened in Kerala from Kerala also classes 1 to 9 last year.
Thank you. I think we have to wind up, but there's a question on medium of instruction and whether English medium schools or other regional language medium school, was there any difference were noticed? Can I have a quick response from Jyotsna? Did you get anything on that?
Not really. English medium schools, I mean, they're largely private schools. So whatever I said for private school, it would remain valid. And in terms of assessment, most states are in the same boat. They have not really conducted exams. Yeah.
So, Professor Oshikawa, any last comments? Because I cut you off a little bit.
Yeah, the one that now, especially for the young generation of, say, lower strata and village society, now sending their children to higher education, especially in Kerala or Tamil North, southern part of India. But I'm very much afraid that the higher education is very costly, and this say, change might be slowing down. I'm very much afraid it. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think on that very sobering comment that it's very afraid about what, not only because of the state of education and the year of online education, but also the whole economic situation and the worsening poverty, how this is going to affect a generation of children. I will now pass on to Nihira Ram to say the last few words.
Thank you, Professor Swaminathan. Thank you all for joining us today. It was a delightful seminar and we learned a lot from it. If you have any questions for any of our speakers, you can leave it in the comments and we will try to sort of email them with the questions that you have and maybe get back in the future. I now request the director of the Foundation for Agrarian Studies, Sandeepan Bakshi, to please deliver the vote of thanks. And before we go to him, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be converting all the attendees to panelists now. So if you can turn on your video for a final screenshot of the event, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Over to Sandeepan. Sandeepan, you're muted.
Thank you. Let me thank you all on behalf of the Foundation for Agrarian Studies, and special thanks to the speakers, Professor Jyotsna Jha, Professor Fumiko Oshikawa, and Dr. Anvar Sadath. It was an insightful, session, and may I say that we got a lot of highlights on the effect of this pandemic, on the effect of COVID-19 on school education across states, across regions, how it differs across genders, caste, and class. But we also got a sense of some success stories, Kerala in particular. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Tamil Nadu could be another case to look for. It is clear that the existing crevices, the existing inequalities, lack of infrastructure, as the panelists mentioned, has become more visible, has become more aggravated as an effect of this pandemic. On that note, let me call this session to a close. Let me also thank you, Professor Madhura Swaminathan, for moderating and chairing the discussion today. Thank you, the online management team of FAS led by Nihira Ram and supported by Vignesh from the Free Software Movement of Karnataka. Thank you, Tapas, for coordinating all the events, the research and these events under the Pandemic Studies Unit. Hope that we will continue to do this good work. And above all, thank you everybody for your participation and for being a part of the journey of the Pandemic Studies Unit as well as this event today. as Nihira said, we'll be very grateful if you could switch on your cameras and for a screenshot.
Yeah, I think Nihira. So we will close with that.
We will, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you to the speakers. Let's see who's here. Okay.